PowerPoint. So just to, Lacey's going to go over just some budget ideas, some actual budget tips.
Okay. So I'm going to start by saying there are lots of different ways you could deal with creating a budget. I'm going to quickly go through with you and show one that I like.
Okay.
So one that I particularly like because I think it's simple is the 50-30-20 budget.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not mine. This came from Elizabeth Warren in her book, All Your Worth,
mm-hmm.
The Ultimate Lifetime Money Plan. Now, I'm also going to say I am not somebody like Rachel Cruz that loves budgeting. I like lots and lots of things that involve money, and I don't really mind the whole budget thing, but I don't get excited about sitting down and doing a budget every month, etc. So I need something that's, once it's kind of set up, it's kind of simple.
Right.
And so this is good for people who are willing to do a little every month on their budget, but maybe they're not on team I love budgeting, and so they want to keep it simple.
Right.
So the idea with this, the 50, the 30, and the 20 are percentages of your income allotted to certain larger categories.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So the 50% is for fixed expenses. So
that's 50% of your take-home pay. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so after taxes and everything. Yeah.
Yes, 50% of your take-home pay. But we'll get into how to calculate that part kind of toward the end, because there is a little bit of a trick to it that you need to account for.
Okay.
But 50% of your take-home pay should be for your fixed expenses. And this is generally a needs category just by default, by the nature of what it is. Things that don't change on a regular basis, like your rent or mortgage, right? These might change once per year as an adjustment happens for either taxes or a rent increase. But generally speaking, number's not changing.
Right.
It might be your car insurance or your Metro Pass if you take public transit.
Mm-hmm.
Could be your water, your sewer, your garbage. Those don't tend to really change much.
Right, your cell phone bill.
Actually, I put cell phone bills somewhere else, and we'll get to that. I actually put it somewhere else, and I'll tell you why in a minute.
Okay, good.
So electricity, I would put in there. That might change a little bit, but it's probably going to be pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put internet typically there because most people at this point need it for workplace as opposed to it used to be a recreational thing.
Yeah.
I do want to pause because I'm the mindset person here before we go to the next category here.
Sure. Let me go back to picture here. Go ahead.
So this category is generally a category where we're focusing on the present. And so when I think about money, I actually do think about past, present, and future when I'm thinking about my money and how I'm spending it. I think it's a really good mindset to be in because we're living in the now, and it's the only moment we're living in, and this is where our enjoyment is and where our needs are, right?
Right.
We do have to plan for the future so that we continue to be in a good space. Then there's always this element of things from the past that we still haven't taken care of. Mm-hmm. So this 50% category has a focus on our immediate needs, the things that we're dealing with in the now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to go and check out that 30% category.
Gotcha. All right.
So the 30% category is your flexible expenses or lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
This also is mostly a focus on the present too for that mindset piece.
Right.
So 30% of your take-home pay goes to this category. This includes wants, but it also includes items where you have the option to choose to pay more based on a want or less. I actually put, and some people would disagree with me, but I put groceries and cell phone both in this category.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the cell phone front, most of us do not have the most basic cell phone plan.
Right.
Most of us are opting to have a more souped up cell phone plan for our lifestyle desires, right? We want to be able to surf the internet on our phone, use it like mini computers. And there's literally nothing wrong with that, but at that point, it's a little more than a need, and it's becoming in the recreational entertainment category as well, right? And groceries, while food is a need, I have to tell you, I buy primarily organics, and they're more expensive, and that's a lifestyle choice I make. So the kinds of things that a lot of us spend our grocery bill on include a lot of things that are wants and that are lifestyle based. And if we really do need to tighten our belt on our budget, most of us can actually save quite a bit on our grocery bill if we decide to do so. So I put it under the flexible category because you do have more wiggle room within those. They're not just set dollar amounts.
Sure.
Other things that would be in this category would be some of your streaming services, right? Cable, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, different kinds of entertainment, meals out, travel, clothing. And I know some of these things are things that you'll argue that you need, but they're flexible. You can dial them back, you can ramp them up, right? You have a lot of wiggle room to make cuts or increase your usage of these things if you've got the money for them.
Right. Well, and plus, they're all things that can be fairly flexible.
Right. They're things that you have flexibility on. Before we go on to the last one, I want to stop and point out that 50% category is really critical. This one is a critical category because if we're spending more than 50% of our take-home pay on these needs, it becomes really difficult for us to be able to get ahead because we haven't left that much money for these lifestyle items and for the items in the 20% category, which we're about to go to.
Right.
If we're spending more than 50%, like when you're in a situation where your rent is already 50%, let alone any of these other things in there, then you can do that for a little while, but it becomes really difficult on a long-term basis to be able to really, make a dent in anything else that you want to do.
Right. It's the classic thing where you bought the place you couldn't afford, or you bought the car that was really expensive because you wanted it, and then it's like, okay, well, your car payments, whatever, already, I've seen this before, it's already like 25% of your take-home income. So essentially, you can't do as much fun stuff, entertainment stuff, because you have to shrink everything else right around that. And it's one of those things. It's tough to explain that to people. It's like, yeah, I know you love the car, but you're basically living for the car at that point. And you don't get to go out and do as much stuff because you have to pay for the car, and it's spilling over and everything else, right?
Right.
All your other expenses. So yeah, the 50% one is probably the one where people get in trouble the easiest.
Right. It's the one that if you can make an adjustment in that category, you can really move the needle a lot, but it's also one of the harder ones to adjust, as opposed to things within that flexible category. One day on the phone with your cell phone provider, it might be on hold for a while, but like you can actually make your cell phone bill change quite a bit if you need to. But changing how much your rent payment or your mortgage payment or one of those things are, this takes a lot more effort.
Well, you already signed something that you agree to that amount, so. Yeah.
Right. You can move the needle quite a lot when you make those alterations, but that's a category where you want to be careful from the get-go, because if you get yourself overcommitted in that category and that becomes 70%, I've had clients come to me and they go, oh, that category was 70% for me. No wonder I'm having issues with these other things. And it's become a really enlightening sort of moment for them. They're like, geez, I might need to rent out a room, or I might need to, when this lease comes up, look for an apartment that's less expensive, where they're realizing they've just overcommitted.
Yeah. Typically in the flexible category where people get in trouble is they take out too much credit. Buying too many clothes.
Too much credit, or they don't pay enough attention to some of those recreational expenditures, like just they kind of let it get away from them.
Right. Like people that have, when they get depressed, they shop.
Right.
And it's the next thing you realize, it's like I'm broke at the end of the month, and you're trying to figure it out. It's like, well, you just spent like $1,000 on clothes or whatever it was, right? A new vase. So yeah, you got to be. That's why. Go ahead. But I was going to say that's why it's important to kind of have a budget so you know where your money's going.
Absolutely. Now let's take a look at the 20% category here.
Yeah.
All right, so 20% is for your goals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one, in terms of the mindset, this one is generally a combination of debt repayment, which is repaying the past, right? This is cleaning up the past,
Mm-hmm.
where maybe you weren't being as mindful with your spending. So you got some things that were thrown on a credit card or an emergency you weren't prepared for, right? Any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Or even paying your student loans, right? That was education I got in the past. We're taking care of that.
Right.
And savings, which is a focus on the future, making sure you're ready for that next emergency or preparing for retirement, right? So this category is usually a combination of both savings and debt repayment goals. This might be student loan payments, credit card payments, auto loans, 401k or IRA contributions, emergency savings, down payment on a home, bridge investing, right? So any of these kinds of things. It even could be a fun goal. They can be fun goals like, I've got a savings account for that trip abroad that I've been wanting to do, right? Because I'm trying to make a goal toward that. So they don't all have to be the kinds of goals that are not fun. Some of them can be fun goals too.
Right. Well, that's where you're when you're doing your budget, that last little bit, that the 20% suggestion, that group is essentially where you're implementing your financial plan, whatever that is, right? Because that's where you're implementing my retirement savings and when I want to retire, right? And setting that goal, or I want to buy the house, or maybe you want to buy a boat or something, whatever, right? That's where your short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals all come into play. So yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing is, people that overcommit in that first category, their fixed expenses category, struggle, and then maybe aren't mindful enough in the flexible or lifestyle category, end up saying, oh, why don't I have enough for retirement? Why can't I get ahead on this debt? I'm trying to make it go away, but it's not going away. It's because it started with that fixed expenses category being too high, and then not being mindful within the flexible lifestyle category creates a situation in this little goals category here.
Right.
So what I tend to have my clients do is start with a month where they look at what spending they did and put it into these broad categories. I also have them take a look at how much money from their total income should be in these overall categories. What is my 50% number if I'm really spending that?
Right.
And then compare what they really did.
Right.
So then they can start to make the adjustments. Once you've done that work on a month-to-month basis, you don't really have to do much in that 50% category, except that maybe once per year you have a rent or a mortgage shift, right? Because it's basically staying the same.
Yeah.
And your goals, because you kind of automating your plan there, this percentage to retirement, this amount going into savings every month, this amount paying down credit cards. You really only have to alter what your plan is in that category when, say, I paid off this credit card, now I need to reallocate what was going to that, right? To something else. But really, you're kind of just like looking in on that category every month and being like, okay, that's still on track.
Right.
So it's that lifestyle spending category is where you're actually doing work each month. And you're once you have what your basic subcategories are, you go, okay, my subscriptions were all the same, my cell phone bill was the same, this is what I did on grocery spending, this is what I did on entertainment.
Right. But it's all pretty much similar.
So, but those are the ones you're checking up on. I go, oh, I really spent a lot more on groceries this month, or I need to watch the entertainment thing because that one's sneaking up on me. So it's really only that one category. So for people like me that I'm willing to do a little work in budgeting, but I don't love it so much that I'm going to spend tons of time on it, this is a really good budgeting system because it's really just that 30% category where I got to do sort of my monthly check-ins on it.
Right. Good. And we're going to talk about that 30% categories that we're going to talk about debt and credit and how that works coming up here. But real quick, the 30% category, The important thing about that, like if you're somebody who struggles with that, where you tend to overspend on entertainment or clothing or whatever it is, um, and I know I've definitely done that before. What I found is really easy is you just have a separate account or a specific like a credit card. Sometimes we'll go over whether or not you should do that, but then I just go, okay, this is what I'm gonna, this is my fun money for the month, and it's on this one card, right? And I'm not going to spend any more than that. Once it's gone, right?
Yeah,
So
I love that, the separate bucket thing. I think about it as separate buckets. When I made a recent real estate purchase, the it was within a building, and so I had to put together this package for the board to look at. And she said that I had more savings accounts than anybody she's ever worked with before,
yeah.
which is funny. It's because I'm extremely visual, and I kind of need to separate things out for
Right.
myself. And a
Mhm.
lot of my clients have started doing that. It's not anything I require of them, but some of them have gone, that was really helpful for me, because if this is my vacation money account and then this over here is my account that I get to spend these other kind of things out of, that's really clear. And so that's why I do it, because it's very clear for me and I don't get my wires crossed on things.
Well, and I'll do it with clients and stuff because it's if I have just this one checking account or credit card that I use just for these things, then when you do your budget at the end of the month, all you have to do is go online and pull up the statement, and you know what all that, and it's all listed right there, so you know what you spent, right?
Right.
And it's not that much work, and it's one of those things where like if you've got a smartphone or a computer, you can go on and it takes you 2 minutes to go into your account and check, oh, how much have I spent this month, how much do I have left, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I like it, because it's easier if it's all sort of conglomerated into one checking account. Then when you pull up the statement, you got to go through, well, that was rent, and then that was this, and then you got to do the math yourself, as opposed to if it's like you said, it's all one bucket. That statement, you could just, I have them name it like, fund money account expenses, right? So when you pull up each of those accounts from your bank, it's like, oh, fund money account. What did I do there? Oh, okay, I overspent this month, so I have to cut it back, right?
Right.
But it's all
Right.
separated out as you go along, right? This card is used to pay for this. This card is used to pay for this. And
Right.
it's the same advice I give to business clients who own businesses, right? You get the separate account for your business, but I said I also get a separate account that's just for expenses, like because you don't. It's I need office supplies, right? I'm going to lunch with a client and I'm paying for it. That way, you know how much you're spending each month, and you know how to do all your deductions on your taxes at the end of the year. So it simplifies it if you do it. That's
It
just
does simplify things.
yeah. So if you're somebody like me who I don't want to have to spend a lot of time sorting through a statement, it's just an easy way to do it. And like your bank doesn't care if you have 5 accounts with them.
No, no, they don't care. It's fine.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll let you relabel them. I use two different credit unions as my sort of primary things, and they will let me rename those accounts. So when I go onto my online banking, it will actually be titled
Right.
as the thing I called it, which I always title it something that relates to its purpose.
Right.
Just another sort of little tip for organizing your money. If you're somebody like me that kind of needs to see it separately.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Now, Duncan, before we go on to another topic,
Yeah.
I do have one more slide. I kind of want
Oh yeah.
forward to give tips if they want to use this budgeting strategy to help them to be a little bit more accurate.
Oh sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I told you at the beginning that when you clarified this is your take-home pay, right?
Right.
It is your take-home pay, but there's a but to it. You actually need to calculate more than just what got direct deposited. You need to do a little bit of math the very first time, and then if you get a raise or something, you need to redo your math a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So this calculation, you have to add back in some of your deductions, okay?
Okay.
Now, you're going to take what gets direct deposited, but you're going to add back in deductions for optional retirement accounts. Like
Right.
if you have things that come out for your 401k or 403b,
Right, because they're in
the
the budget. Yeah.
optional ones you add back in, not the required ones.
Right.
So somebody like me who is also a teacher, I'm required to have roughly like 5% taken out. I don't add that back in, and let me explain why we're adding things back in. Because you opted to have that taken out, and you see in your goals category,
Right.
you're going to write down how much money is coming out for that goal of your 4K contribution.
Yeah, so you need to add it into the total.
But you need to add it into the total, because if you weren't electing to have that go into your retirement, it would be in your paycheck.
Right.
So you kind of have to account for it in both spots. But for example, with my pension, I had no choice. I couldn't say don't take that out and put it into my take-home pay. So I'm not accounting for that when I figure out my take-home pay.
Right.
But I'm adding back in my optional ones like my 401k, 403b.
Right.
If you have an amount you're deducting for an optional HSA, like health savings account, that also is the sort of thing you'll add back in. So if you have any sort of those cafeteria plans, etc., where you're having money come out optionally, add that back in, because you're probably also going to like make a number for it under probably the goals category, most likely.
Okay.
Also, make sure you don't forget to include income sources from side gigs, rental property, anything like that. After the taxes that have been held to the side. There are those sort of like little tricky things that you want to kind of like make sure you're stopping and thinking about here. People forget they have this, they think about their regular paycheck, but they have this sort of little side stream of income that they maybe aren't putting into their budget, or if they're putting it in, they're putting in the whole amount they got and not thinking about the fact that actually there's an amount that's being held to the side for taxes.
Right.
So those are little considerations in figuring out what that base number is. So when you figure out what that base number is, what the income level is, then go through and figure out, if I'm literally doing 50, 30, and 20, how much of my money would be in those categories. And that's how you can start yourself, so you can figure out what you've been doing versus what that balance would look like.
Right. Cool. Cool. I would say that the 50, 30, 20 is a good guide to start with. But everybody's circumstances are going to be a little bit different. If you're the kind of person who, you don't want to, maybe you're single and you don't want a big place, but you make a lot of money, well, then you probably don't need to be going all the way to 50 on the first category. If you just want to get the 2-bedroom apartment or something, whatever, right? Or the condo.
Duncan, I'm so glad that you said that, because I have to say it. I do a slide like this, with my clients, where I'm revealing about my own in particular. I didn't add that here, but at one point in time, I didn't do this. This wasn't a forever thing. It was during a little patch of time, but I had gotten my first category, the fixed category, was actually less than 30% of the take home. There was a real concerted effort there to really minimize that category, to be able to save a rather large amount in kind of I wouldn't call it a short amount of time, but sort of in a medium range amount of time. And so individual circumstances absolutely are critical there.
Right.
And I feel like once you understand what your 50, 30, and 20 would look like, you can intentionally elect to shift those around a little bit. But what I would urge people not to do is to do their absolute best not to go over 50% in that first category. Otherwise, you don't leave a lot of room for these other things to do with your money, being goals and your lifestyle, which is also important.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is because I hear a lot of these bad sort of financial, the 5-7 step plan shit that people give you, that we rail against quite a bit here, or I do at least. The thing that I hate about that is that a lot of times when they're pushing you to like your debt stuff, your student loans, your home or credit debt or whatever it is, they kind of want to push you to like completely cut your flexible spending. and put all that to like your entertainment, your clothes, and whatnot. And it's one of those things where it's like, at that point, it's like the guy with the car. You're just living to pay the debt at that point. Um, and I think it's important because you got to set realistic goals. Like we use the go into the gym sort of analogy, right? If you're not real responsible, maybe you should phone a friend kind of thing to keep you online. But it's also important, like if you go into the gym and you're just starting to work out, you're not bench pressing 250 pounds because you can get hurt, right? And it's one of those things where if you set unrealistic goals, like if you're used to going out to dinner once a week and you say, well, I'm not going to do that anymore, you're going to be depressed and it's going to, it's not likely you're going to stick to it. So just be realistic, right? But if it's one of those things where you're going out to dinner 5 nights a week, maybe we should think about cutting it down to two, but you still get to have some fun. So it's not like, it's not like we cut it all out because you're
It's down to two, and it's within kind of a certain dollar amount sort of
right,
proximity, or that if you're going to spend more than XYZ, that two's become one,
right, right.
Yeah.
But it's yeah,
I think minimize spending in those areas, but sort of like the idea of dieting.
Yeah.
If you don't intentionally plant in treats or indulgences, then you almost run the risk of overindulging to a certain point out of frustration. So it might be, a little bit better of a strategy to be extremely intentional about planting those things in there. I mean, especially, I'm a huge advocate of getting out of debt because then it's less payments that you're required to make regarding your past, and I think that's great. But so you might restrict yourself a little bit more during that time. But I don't think it's a nothing. It's not a nothing thing. Otherwise, you're not living your life either.
Right. And it's like people like they shop when they're depressed or upset, or they do it for they do it for fun or whatever. And some people have kind of, I think they call like shopping addicts. I mean, it is a little bit of an addiction, I guess, for some people. What I would say, like when I've talked to them, it's like, well, I just need to stop shopping, and it's like, no, you just need to spend less, right? So if you're spending $300 a week on shopping for random stuff, maybe we set a limit where you only spend $100 a week or 150 or 200, and then we just slowly ratchet it back. So you can still go shopping.
But you need a shopping plan,
right?
Not a shopping free for all.
Right.
Just like people dieting, trying to lose some weight, need an eating plan. They don't stop eating. They have a plan for it.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that once again, it's all personalized for who it is and what your budget's doing. But like that, the 50, 30, 20, it's just a really good place to start. And then maybe you do it, and then you realize, well, I'm not eating away that much money in the 50% category, the fixed income stuff. So I'm going to go to, do I want to save more, or do I want to have more fun, or do I want to, maybe put the money away for a vacation or whatever, right?
Split the difference, right? A little more to goals, a little more to lifestyle,
Right. Or it might be that you have some situation where like you own the house and you're really attached to it, but it's a little bit more expensive, right? So maybe that goes up, and then you have to cut back somewhere else. So it's all personalized for what every individual wants to do, right? Once again, if you're in a relationship kind of thing, I would be, it's one of those things you have to talk to them about it, but at the same time, it's like you need to be reasonable on both sides. It can't just, I mean, that was what killed me about that whole thing with hers. It's like, yeah, we'll just go talk about it and everything will be fine. It's like, you gotta, you gotta be reasonable when you give. Because I've seen it enough times where it's like, yeah, they talk about it, but one of them is just being completely obstinate. Right. And you see that especially when you have one person who saves a lot and another person who spends, which is pretty common. Right. It's the joke. They were talking about when Greece was when they were pretty much bankrupt and they had to get bailed out by Germany. And they did a sketch where they had the Greek gods meeting, and they're asking, "Well, who's the Greek god of finance? Who was in charge of this?" Right? And finally, the guy that shows up is Dionysus, and he's the god of partying. They're like, Dionysus is the one handling the finances. And he's like, oh yeah. And they're like, well, how's it go? What's happening with the finances? Well, I got the spending part down. Spending, I'm doing the spending. I really get the spending. What's the other part? Savings. Oh, I didn't do that. Right? So
Oh, yeah.
you just got to be really, really cognizant of what you're doing because you do have to do both. But don't necessarily shirk on spending if you want to have fun. I think that's too many people give you that advice of don't do this, and it's like sometimes it's okay, just within reason.